By the year 2026, a quiet but devastating shock is ripping through everyday life in America. More than 7,000 grocery and retail stores have already shut their doors across the country, leaving gaping holes in strip malls and neighborhood centers that once bustled with activity. But that raw number alone isn't the most alarming part of this unfolding story. What is truly unsettling, and what few mainstream economic reports are fully capturing, is that over 30 million Americans now live in what are classified as food deserts. These are places where the closest supermarket offering fresh produce and meat can be 10 to even 20 miles away, requiring significant travel time and expense just to secure basic nutrition. At the very same time these physical locations are vanishing, food prices are climbing much faster than wages for nearly every age group, hitting people over the age of 50 especially hard as they often rely on fixed incomes or savings that are being rapidly depleted by inflation. You might not notice the cumulative impact right away. It happens slowly, almost invisibly at first. Then one morning, the reality hits you with undeniable force. The grocery store you have relied on for years, the one where you know exactly which aisle holds the cereal and where the pharmacists know your name, is suddenly closed. A padlock is on the door, and the windows are covered in brown paper. Simultaneously, you realize your weekly food bill has jumped by 40% compared to just a few years ago. And now, because your local store is gone, you are forced to drive twice as far just to pick up a handful of basic necessities. That precise moment is when the abstract concept of economic change becomes an impossible reality to ignore. Behind those locked doors lies an uncomfortable truth that many are trying to avoid facing. America's grocery system, once the envy of the world for its abundance and convenience, is starting to fracture fundamentally. This fracturing is affecting everyone, from small local chains that have served communities for decades to massive monolithic corporations that were once thought to be entirely untouchable. Even more shocking is the severity of the collapse at the top. The chain that ranks number one in this analysis has shut down more than 390 locations due to insurmountable financial losses, followed almost immediately by another 44 closures caused by a disaster few people ever imagined could happen in a modern supply chain. So, the ultimate question becomes, which grocery chain could take two massive, debilitating hits back-to-back and still manage to stay afloat? Stick with this narrative until the very end, because understanding what is really happening behind the scenes will completely change how you view the American grocery system in the year 2026 and beyond. For generations, Kroger stood as one of the absolute pillars of the American grocery world. With more than 140 years of history behind it, thousands of locations spread nationwide, and deep roots in households led by people over the age of 50, Kroger wasn't just a store to many people. For countless families, the brand was tied to memories of holiday dinners, home-cooked meals, and routine weekly trips that defined the rhythm of domestic life. But by the year 2025, something unfamiliar and unsettling began to surface within the giant. For the first time in decades, this massive company started significantly pulling back its physical footprint. In its most recent earnings reports leading up to this point, Kroger acknowledged plans to shut down roughly 60 stores over the following 18 months. On the surface, it wasn't a dramatic overnight collapse, but it was a potent signal that even the industry giants are no longer immune to the deep structural rot affecting retail. The traditional supermarket model, which relies on high volume and low prices, is becoming increasingly difficult to sustain in an economy that is evolving faster than corporate strategies can possibly adapt. Inside Kroger's vast, sprawling operation, the strain is unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Labor expenses climb relentlessly every single quarter as workers demand living wages in an expensive world. Fuel costs and immense supply chain pressures continue to spike unpredictably like a lingering illness that refuses to break. The massive refrigerated trucks required to restock shelves daily across a continent now cost significantly more to operate than the average store earns in sheer profit. And in an industry where margins traditionally sit at just 1 to 3% on a good day, even minor shifts in these foundational costs can carve deeply into earnings and turn profitable locations into financial liabilities. Yet, the most serious challenge facing Kroger isn't just rising costs. It is shifting human behavior. American shoppers, particularly middle-income households and older adults watching their retirement savings dwindle, are quietly but decisively changing how and where they shop for food. They are not abandoning Kroger out of some newfound frustration or dislike for the brand itself. They are simply choosing alternatives that better fit their increasingly constrained financial realities. Walmart offers consistently lower prices on staples. Aldi delivers speed, simplicity, and a no-frills experience that respects the wallet. Dollar General is physically closer to home for quick trips in rural areas. Costco makes more financial sense for long-term savings on bulk items. Caught somewhere between all of them, Kroger finds itself stuck in the dangerous middle without a clear, defining identity in the modern market. It isn't the cheapest, it isn't the fastest, and it isn't the most cost-efficient option anymore. In the ruthless world of retail, being undefined can be more dangerous than losing outright. Adding to the profound uncertainty, Kroger's long-hoped-for merger with Albertsons remains stalled under intense antitrust scrutiny by government regulators wary of creating a monopoly. The company cannot move forward with its grand plan for consolidation, and it cannot fully pull back either. What once felt like an unstoppable, well-oiled system now resembles a massive cargo ship forced to toss containers overboard just to stay afloat in rough seas. But the real consequences of this retreat don't show up first on complex financial statements. They appear on neighborhood maps and in the lives of real people. When a Kroger location closes in a small community or an urban neighborhood, the void it leaves behind is often significant and immediate. In some towns, Kroger is the only full-service grocery store available, offering fresh produce, a reliable pharmacy, and prices people can manage. Once it is gone, older residents may need to drive an extra 20 minutes just to buy essential medications or fresh vegetables. Employees with a decade or more on the job suddenly find themselves unemployed in a difficult job market. Nearby cafes, dry cleaners, and small shops that relied on the foot traffic from the grocery anchor store slowly lose their customer base as well. There is rarely an explosion or a dramatic announcement. Just a quiet moment when someone pulls into a familiar parking lot and finds it eerily empty, the automatic doors locked tight and a store closing sign swaying gently in the wind. Kroger has not failed entirely, but it is changing in a way few ever imagined possible. It is a massive institution learning painfully how to shrink in order to survive. And when one of the strongest players in the history of the industry begins to retreat, it says a great deal about the precarious state of the American grocery market in the mid-2020s. Some corporate names grow so large and deeply embedded in the culture that people naturally assume they are immune to economic turbulence. Albertsons has long been one of those names, a titan of the industry. But in the year 2025, a stark reality surfaced that sent shockwaves through the entire retail world. A company that owns household brands respected by millions, names like Safeway, Visionas, Jewel Osco, and Shaw's, is now entering the most vulnerable period in its nearly 90-year history. There is a concept in business that many large, successful corporations ignore until it is absolutely too late to correct course. If you do not disrupt yourself and evolve, the market will inevitably do it for you, often brutally. For Albertsons, that warning is no longer a theoretical classroom discussion. The market itself is doing the disruption, and it is happening in real time, right before the eyes of consumers and investors alike. One of the most alarming signals comes from detailed financial analysis, whereby Albertsons has been flagged as having a very high risk of default. A massive pension fund shortfall hovering around $565 million has left tens of thousands of current and former employees deeply concerned about their long-term financial future and security in retirement. In parts of California, Washington State, and Nevada, regular customers began noticing subtle red flags months before any major headlines appeared in the financial press. Store shelves emptied more quickly than usual and remained bare for days. Popular products weren't restocked on time, leaving gaping holes in the aisles. Longtime employees quietly admitted to regular shoppers that something felt off, that the store no longer operated with the smooth efficiency it once did. A brand that used to signal rock-solid stability and reliability for families has slowly become associated with uncertainty and quiet anxiety. The irony of the situation is hard to ignore. The multi-billion-dollar merger with Kroger, once viewed by executives as the crucial lifeline that could help both companies survive an increasingly brutal and competitive grocery landscape dominated by non-traditional players like Amazon and Walmart, has been stalled by regulators. Instead of serving as a rescue mechanism, the blocked deal has left Albertsons suspended in an uncomfortable and dangerous operational limbo. It is too weakened financially to fully stand on its own and invest in necessary improvements, yet it is legally prevented from joining forces to regain strength. As Albertsons falters, the consequences ripple outward into the communities it serves. When a major grocery chain stumbles, entire neighborhoods feel the impact. Older adults lose a trusted and familiar place to shop where they feel comfortable. Nearby small businesses see fewer customers walk through their doors as the anchor tenant fails. Neighborhoods that rely on an Albertsons subsidiary as their primary food source suddenly find themselves edging toward food desert status. What truly unsettles people isn't just the closure of a handful of underperforming stores. It is the profound realization that even companies once considered unbreakable bedrock institutions are now struggling to maintain their footing in an increasingly unpredictable American economy. If Albertsons, traditionally one of the nation's three largest grocery chains, is facing this level of fundamental instability, the deeper question becomes impossible to ignore. How much longer can anyone place full confidence in the stability of the system at all? When a long-established brand begins drifting into uncertain territory, many people over the age of 50, particularly on the West Coast, feel it almost personally. For decades, Safeway wasn't just another grocery store option among many. It was woven intimately into the daily routines of millions. The red club card on the keychain, the early morning stops for fresh bread, the quiet familiarity of knowing exactly where everything was located in the aisles. Most people assumed Safeway would always be there, unchanging. But the years 2025 and 2026 are telling a very different story. There is a sentiment often shared by older, loyal customers that captures the essence of the problem. At Safeway, they often recognize the employees and feel recognized in return, a sense of community absent in the vastness of competitors like Walmart. That sense of recognition, of belonging to a local ecosystem, is exactly why Safeway's decline feels especially painful to so many longtime customers. The cold reality is that Safeway is being pulled down by a larger structural problem within its parent company, Albertsons. When the parent company struggles with debt and strategic paralysis, its individual brands cannot remain untouched by the fallout. Across California, Washington, and Oregon, Safeway locations have quietly reduced total inventory, shortened operating hours to save on labor, and in some notable cases, closed altogether. What is most unsettling about this process is the lack of warning. There are rarely big headlines or public announcements beforehand. People only realize something is fundamentally wrong when they pull into a parking lot they have used for 20 years and find it empty, the signage stripped away. Safeway isn't losing customers because people suddenly stop caring about the brand. It is losing ground because it is trapped inside a bloated corporate system it no longer controls. The antitrust investigations have frozen the merger that might have stabilized operations and provided needed capital. Aging supply chains create constant bottlenecks that leave shelves bare. Meanwhile, labor costs on the West Coast continue rising faster than revenue can keep up, squeezing the stores from both sides. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the brand value is being worn down by attrition. There is a quiet sadness in all of this for many observers. Safeway once symbolized the ultimate convenience and reliability of 20th century grocery shopping. Today, it is struggling desperately to keep pace with the speed, technology, and price expectations of the 21st century. Its digital app feels clunky compared to competitors. Its prices cannot match Walmart or Winco Foods. Younger shoppers gravitate toward Trader Joe's for affordability and a unique experience, while older adults increasingly choose Costco for long-term value and bulk purchasing. That leaves Safeway stuck in the undefined middle like a loyal old friend who simply cannot run fast enough to keep up in a new, more demanding race. Many believed Safeway would hold on for several more decades based on its legacy alone. But watching stores thin out and shelves grow quieter has made something starkly clear. Even the most iconic brands have absolute limits. Perhaps the most troubling part is what this means for smaller communities. In many places in the West, Safeway isn't just a grocery store. It is the essential backbone of daily life. When it disappears, so does a sense of routine and stability that is hard to replace. Safeway is changing in ways few people wanted or expected, serving as a visible indicator of a retail era that is fading away. When Amazon Fresh first appeared on the scene, it felt to many like the grocery industry had stepped straight into a science fiction future. The promise was intoxicating. Shoppers could wave a hand to enter through a turnstile, grab whatever they needed from the shelves, and simply walk right out the door. No checkout lines, no waiting for cashiers, no awkward small talk while paying. It was a vision so polished, efficient, and futuristic that failure seemed almost impossible for a company with Amazon's resources. Then the year 2025 arrived, bringing an outcome few tech enthusiasts expected. One by one, those gleaming stores of tomorrow began closing their doors or pausing expansion plans indefinitely. What truly confuses people isn't just that Amazon Fresh locations are shutting down. It's the bigger question behind the failure. How does a technology powerhouse with virtually unlimited financial resources stumble so badly in something as fundamental to human existence as selling groceries? The explanation lives in the gritty details most people never saw while marveling at the technology. The Just Walk Out system relied on incredibly dense networks of cameras, weight sensors on shelves, and massive back-end computing power. Each store cost millions of dollars just to equip and maintain with this hardware. That level of technological sophistication might make sense in high-margin tech hardware, but grocery stores operate on razor-thin margins, often netting just a few pennies on every dollar of sales. The smarter and more advanced the system becomes, the more expensive it is to run and update. And in food retail, higher operating costs make significant financial losses dangerously easy to accumulate. Furthermore, the technology, while impressive, couldn't solve basic retail problems. Sensors can track movement with precision, but they cannot keep fresh vegetables from wilting under fluorescent lights. Artificial intelligence can process vast amounts of purchasing data, but it cannot replace a human employee who smiles and genuinely recommends a product. It is a small human moment, yet one that technology still cannot replicate meaningfully. The contrast is stark. Amazon can manage the incredibly complex logistics of delivering a $600 refrigerator to your doorstep overnight, but it struggles profoundly to sell a $3 package of salad greens profitably in a physical store. That contrast says a great deal about the nature of the business. Human shopping habits are not just lines of code that can simply be rewritten by an algorithm. Older shoppers still want to ask questions about ingredients. Middle-aged customers still check expiration dates carefully by hand. Younger buyers still compare prices relentlessly and expect better deals than what they found at Amazon Fresh, which often felt overpriced. Amazon Fresh isn't failing because it lacks innovation. It is faltering because it misunderstood something deceptively simple about human nature. Grocery shopping isn't just a sterile financial transaction to be optimized for speed. It is emotional, habitual, sensory, and deeply human. When a company that once transformed how the whole world shops is forced to scale back its own ambitious grocery experiment, it is more than just a business setback for Amazon. It is a significant warning sign about the limits of technology in solving the fundamental challenges of the American grocery industry. When the primary grocery store for the poor in a community shuts down, where are those people supposed to go to feed their families? It is a short, simple question, but in the years 2025 and 2026, it sounds like a quiet, collective sigh of despair coming from impoverished neighborhoods across the country. Save-A-Lot was built for a single, crucial purpose: to sell staple foods that low-income families could actually afford on tight budgets. When a deep discount grocer like this starts disappearing from the landscape, it stops being just another business story about profit and loss. It becomes a stark warning about the state of society itself. By the year 2025, Save-A-Lot continued to shrink its footprint significantly after already closing or selling off more than 300 stores over the previous decade. In states like Missouri, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, customers in struggling towns watched the same sad pattern unfold over and over. Store shelves slowly thinned out over weeks. Fewer products appeared on delivery trucks each week. Then one morning, a simple, handwritten store closing sign went up on the door, often without any detailed explanation or advance notice to the community. The issue has never been a lack of shoppers needing the store. Save-A-Lot locations in these areas were rarely empty of people. The real problem is harsher and more systemic than that. Its core customer base is struggling so intensely financially that their combined purchasing power alone isn't enough to keep the chain alive in its current form. Meanwhile, competitors that focus heavily on extreme operational efficiency, giants like Dollar General, Aldi, and Walmart Neighborhood Market, have turned low prices into a finely tuned, massive profit machine through scale and logistics. Save-A-Lot, burdened by a fragmented franchise structure where individual owners struggle, weaker supply chains that cost more to operate, and limited capital for upgrades, simply cannot run at the same relentless pace as its larger rivals. It is not that the idea of the store failed. The need for it is greater than ever. It is that the ruthless economic system around it moved faster and harder than the company could keep up with. What truly unsettles experts who study food access is what this signals beneath the surface of economic data. When a grocery store designed specifically for low-income communities cannot survive, it suggests that working-class living conditions are far worse than what top-line economic reports reveal. The closure of a discount supermarket doesn't just create another food desert defined by miles to the nearest store. It creates something deeper and more damaging: a hope desert, where families are left with only higher-priced options like convenience stores or fast food that they cannot realistically afford, trapping them further in cycles of poverty and poor health. For those over 50 and carefully counting every single dollar spent on housing, medicine, and daily essentials, the disappearance of stores like Save-A-Lot is a devastating blow to their ability to remain independent. In March of the year 2025, something unsettling rippled through the retail landscape of the American South. Grocers and industry observers across the Southeast confirmed that additional Winn-Dixie locations would permanently shut their doors throughout the year. These were not just vague rumors or temporary adjustments to operating hours. They were real, permanent closures unfolding so quickly that many neighborhoods had little time to react or plan alternatives. For nearly a century, Winn-Dixie was an integral part of everyday life in states like Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. It wasn't just a store, it was a familiar cultural presence, so deeply rooted in the region that many people assumed it would always be there, like the humidity in August. But the mid-2020s are proving otherwise. Even a regional icon with deep historical ties cannot avoid the economic storm battering the grocery industry. So what pushed a brand like Winn-Dixie to this breaking point? The first major pressure comes from accumulated debt and operating expenses that have spiraled entirely out of control. Transportation costs to move goods across the sprawling, hot Southeast are now the highest the company has ever faced. At the same time, wages continue rising due to necessary changes in state labor laws and market competition, while the buying power of the average Southern household has dropped sharply after 3 straight years of punishing inflation. Winn-Dixie no longer holds a clear competitive advantage in this environment. It isn't the cheapest option compared to Walmart or Aldi. It isn't the fastest or most convenient. And as shoppers become more practical and ruthless with every dollar they spend, historical brand loyalty alone is no longer enough to keep people coming back week after week. Even more damaging is the physical age of the system itself. Many Winn-Dixie locations still rely on outdated point-of-sale technology and aging refrigeration units that are expensive to repair. Restocking processes are slow and inefficient compared to modern competitors. Inventory tracking lacks the consistency needed in a low-margin business. Together, these operational weaknesses create a heavy burden, making each store closure feel like a piece of Southern memory quietly slipping away into history. When the red store closing signs began appearing in windows, many residents finally understood the gravity of what was happening. Winn-Dixie isn't just a supermarket to them. It sets the rhythm of community life in many small towns. And now that rhythm is starting to fall apart, leaving uncertainty in its wake. The sentiment, "I want to eat healthy, but I can't afford to live healthy anymore," captures the entire crushing dilemma facing Sprouts Farmers Market in the year 2025. For years, Sprouts represented an attainable middle ground for millions of Americans. It was the place people went when they wanted cleaner foods, organic options, and better produce without paying the notoriously high prices of Whole Foods. It stood for balance and good intentions. But as inflation drags on relentlessly year after year, even the best intentions come with a much higher price tag that many can no longer sustain. A box of strawberries costing $9, basic salad greens priced at $5, organic meat priced at double what traditional supermarkets charge for conventional cuts. That level of pricing quietly but effectively pushes many middle-class shoppers away, even those who genuinely care deeply about what they eat and feed their families. By the year 2025, Sprouts began quietly pulling back its presence in states like California, Colorado, Arizona, and New York. In some cases, store signage vanished almost overnight. There were no press releases acknowledging the failures, no warning campaigns to customers, no time for communities to adjust. One day the store was open, and the next it simply wasn't. The uncomfortable reality is that Sprouts now sits in a terribly awkward economic position. It is too expensive for the budget-conscious majority, yet not compelling or luxurious enough to justify the high cost for many affluent shoppers who might choose Whole Foods instead. The issue isn't declining quality of the food. The issue is that in the economic climate of 2025 and 2026, eating clean has stopped being an easy or accessible choice for the masses. For millions of American families, it has transformed into a luxury expense they must cut. And when families are forced to choose between buying healthier food and keeping the lights on or paying the rent, the decision unfortunately does not take long to make. The retreat of Sprouts is a signal that the aspirational middle-class lifestyle, which included access to affordable, high-quality food, is shrinking rapidly. Few people expected a grocery concept once seen as a gentler, more approachable version of Trader Joe's or a more localized Whole Foods to unravel quickly. Yet, in the year 2025, the collapse of niche, organic-focused markets like Lies Market has become one of the most surprising developments for everyday shoppers who valued them. For years, stores like Lies Market filled a rare and valued gap in the landscape, offering healthier, often organic or locally sourced food at prices that didn't feel completely out of reach for the upper middle class. The welcoming, smaller store atmosphere, cleaner product lineup, and modest costs compared to luxury grocers made it a regular stop for many families trying to eat better. But the very qualities that once defined these markets turned into massive liabilities, as the cost of producing and transporting organic food soared globally. By late 2024 and moving into early 2025, the company reported alarming double-digit drops in revenue as their core customer base pulled back spending. Within a matter of weeks, multiple locations across states like Colorado, Florida, and Ohio closed their doors permanently. A brand once praised by food activists as the future of affordable clean eating is now disappearing with alarming speed. The deeper problem goes beyond just bad timing. It is structural. Stores like Lies Market operated on extremely thin margins, hoping volume would make up for lower prices on expensive goods, all while their competitors evolved faster and smarter. Trader Joe's refined its private label cost controls and supply chain to an almost unmatched level of efficiency. Whole Foods gained the immense financial muscle and logistical backbone of Amazon, allowing it to weather market storms. Sprouts, despite its own struggles, had already expanded its reach and market share significantly. Niche markets like Lies were left standing alone without the scale to compete on price or the financial backing to endure sustained losses. In today's unforgiving grocery economy, standing alone is rarely enough to survive. The uncomfortable truth is that the business model itself wasn't necessarily wrong in principle. It simply arrived and tried to scale in a deeply unfavorable economic era. In the year 2025, having the right idea doesn't guarantee survival. Shoppers now make food decisions based almost exclusively on what their wallets allow in the moment, not what their ideals prefer. As essential living costs continue to rise across the board, the idea of truly affordable organic food starts to feel less like a realistic business plan and more like a fading dream from a more prosperous time. These collapses didn't happen because they failed to deliver quality. They collapsed because they were designed for a more financially comfortable America than the one people are actually living in today. Back in the year 1916, Piggly Wiggly fundamentally changed the way the world shopped for groceries forever. It introduced the revolutionary concept of self-service shopping, allowing customers to grab a cart, walk the aisles freely, and choose their own items off the shelves instead of handing a list to a clerk behind a counter. That simple, powerful idea became the bedrock foundation of every modern supermarket worldwide. Yet, by the year 2025, the very company that pioneered this dominant model is now struggling desperately to survive within the world it helped create. Piggly Wiggly isn't just another regional chain facing hard times. It represents the living history of the grocery industry. But more than a century after its innovation, this once revolutionary brand is slowly being erased from the American retail landscape. Its disappearance isn't happening with splashy headlines or high-profile public drama, but through quiet, steady, relentless closures that few people outside the immediate communities notice until it is already over. Between the years 2022 and 2025, numerous Piggly Wiggly locations across South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi were forced to shut down because their revenue simply could not keep up with rising operating costs. Stores that were once full of life and serving communities during the 1980s and 90s now sit empty and decaying. The familiar, cheerful Mr. Pig signs have been taken down, replaced occasionally by small, struggling independent businesses, or more often, left hanging in vacancy for months or years at a time. The reasons for this decline are no longer a mystery to industry analysts. Piggly Wiggly relies on an outdated and often inefficient franchise structure that offers little support to individual store owners. Its logistics and supply chains are aging and lack the sophisticated technology of modern competitors. It has no realistic way to match Walmart's aggressive expansion and pricing powers or compete with Aldi's rock-bottom operational costs. As the entire grocery industry shifts toward extreme efficiency, automation, and razor-thin optimization powered by data, a system built largely on tradition and legacy alone has very little room left to adapt and survive. What hurts many older folks the most isn't just that Piggly Wiggly is closing. It is the manner in which it disappears. There are no grand announcements, no fond farewells to the communities served for decades. One day, the familiar sign at the end of the street is simply gone, leaving a void. And that raises an unsettling question for everyone. If the company that once defined the very future of grocery shopping cannot survive today's economic storm, who actually has the strength to endure what is coming next? When an entire nationwide chain begins to fall apart, it is usually because of slow accumulating losses over years or a gradual shift in consumer habits that leaves them behind. But what pulled Family Dollar under in the years leading up to 2026 was something far more extreme and sudden. It was an event unlike anything the American grocery and discount retail industry had ever witnessed in modern times. In less than 3 years, Family Dollar was forced to shut down a staggering 390 stores due to mounting financial losses and desperate internal restructuring attempts. That number alone would have been a devastating blow to any retailer. But the true breaking point, the event that shattered consumer confidence, came from a disaster no one could have predicted in 21st century America. A massive, uncontrolled rodent infestation at a key facility triggered a federal emergency order that immediately, overnight, closed another 404 stores. Very few companies, no matter their size, can survive a sudden, catastrophic blow of that magnitude to their operations and reputation. This wasn't just a failure of routine operations or a bad quarterly report. It was visceral evidence that something deep inside the company's system had already decayed dangerously. When federal inspectors entered one of the company's massive distribution centers in Arkansas in the year 2022, what they found was deeply disturbing and stomach-churning. Food packaging was gnawed open on an industrial scale. Rodent droppings were contaminating merchandise throughout the facility. Entire sections of inventory meant for store shelves were completely compromised by filth. The fallout from this discovery was historic in its severity. Family Dollar was forced to issue a recall for more than 1,000 different types of products, marking one of the largest and most damaging recalls ever recorded in the discount retail sector. That shock to the system didn't fade quickly with the news cycle. It carried through the years 2023, 2024, 2025, and right into 2026, effectively stripping the chain of customer trust, severing critical relationships with suppliers who didn't want their brands associated with the mess, and eliminating any realistic path to a quick recovery. Once basic confidence in the safety of the food is gone, the decline accelerates rapidly. What makes Family Dollar's collapse especially painful from a social perspective is exactly who it primarily served. These stores are often located in low-income urban neighborhoods and isolated rural towns. For many families without reliable transportation, Family Dollar wasn't just a convenient stop. It was the only affordable option for household necessities and basic food items within miles. When a Family Dollar shuts down in one of these communities, the residents don't just lose a store, they lose critical access. It means longer, more expensive drives to the next town, being forced to pay higher prices at gas stations for milk and bread, and having fewer choices overall. For some households, the closure means having to choose between buying enough groceries for the week and putting gas in the car just to get to work. That is why the collapse of Family Dollar is so significant. It isn't just about the failure of a business. It is about the creation of a deep social void that leaves the most vulnerable populations exposed. If even a chain designed to serve the deepest discount market cannot survive, it casts a long shadow over the future of retail accessibility in America.